Father's Day was my worst nightmare. The last thing I expected to hear on Father's Day was my own son's voice telling a 911 dispatcher that a strange man was harassing his family on the porch. That strange man was me, Daniel Pierce, 49 years old, standing in the June heat in a collared shirt I'd ironed twice, holding a wrapped box with a fishing reel inside, the good one, the one Caleb had circled in a catalogue 3 Christmases ago, back when he still circled things and showed me. I hadn't seen my son in 14 months. I had driven 6 hours to see him for one afternoon, and within 4 minutes of standing on his front steps, he was backing away from me like I was a stranger who'd wandered off the street, and his wife was already dialing. "Caleb," I said, and my voice cracked on the single syllable in a way that embarrassed me even as it left my mouth. "It's me, it's Dad." "I know who you are," he said. His jaw was tight, the same tight jaw his mother used to get right before she said something designed to end an argument rather than win it. "That's the problem. I want to tell you I saw it coming. I didn't. I want to tell you I understood in that moment what 14 months of silence had been building toward. I didn't understand anything except that my son, my only child, the boy I had taught to tie a hook, to shave, to drive a stick shift in an empty parking lot on a Sunday morning, was standing on a porch I had never seen before, in a town I had never visited, looking at me like I was a threat to be managed. "Sir, I need you to step back from the property," his wife said. Her name was Renee. I had met her exactly twice, both times at a courthouse, neither time by choice. "I'm his father," I said, and even I could hear how useless the words were, how they'd already stopped meaning what they used to mean. The patrol car arrived 9 minutes later. Small towns, fast response times. I remember thinking that with a strange, floating detachment, the way you notice irrelevant details during a car accident. 9 minutes. In 9 minutes a marriage falls apart, or doesn't. In 9 minutes a diagnosis gets delivered, or doesn't. In 9 minutes, apparently, your son can decide you are a public safety concern. The officer was young, maybe 30, with the careful, neutral face of someone who has been trained not to take sides until he has to. He asked for my ID. He asked me to explain why I was there. He listened to Caleb explain that I had a history of instability and wasn't supposed to be here, which was a lie built out of half-truths so carefully arranged that I almost admired it, the way you might admire a forged signature, not for its honesty but for its craftsmanship. I didn't have a restraining order. There was no court document. There was only a decision Caleb had made, alone or with help, that I no longer belonged in the category of people who got explanations. "Sir, I'd recommend you head out," the officer said to me, not unkindly. "No charges being filed today, but I think it's best you go." So I went. I put the fishing reel back in my truck on the passenger seat, where it sat like a small wrapped accusation the entire 6 hours home. I didn't cry until I hit the state line, and then I didn't stop for almost 40 minutes, pulled over on the shoulder with my hazards on, a grown man sobbing into his own hands while 18-wheelers thundered past close enough to rock the truck. That was Father's Day. That was the day my son called the police on me for the crime of loving him too visibly, in the wrong place, at the wrong time, in a story someone else had already finished writing before I arrived. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a cup of coffee that went cold twice, and I started writing down everything I knew, because somewhere between the state line and my driveway, grief had curdled into something colder and far more useful. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to keep showing up uninvited and getting turned away like a door-to-door salesman. I was going to find out exactly what story Caleb had been told about me, and I was going to make sure he heard the true one, whether he wanted to or not. Here is what you need to understand about how a father becomes a stranger to his own son. It doesn't happen in one dramatic scene. It happens in 1,000 small ones, engineered so patiently that by the time you notice the pattern, you're already the villain in it. My ex-wife Marisol and I divorced when Caleb was 11. It wasn't clean. Few divorces are. There was a custody battle that lasted longer than our marriage's final good year, and during that battle I said things in depositions and mediation sessions that I'm not proud of, because grief and fear make architects of very ugly houses. But I paid my support on time, every time, for 9 years. I made every scheduled visitation until Caleb turned 16 and stopped wanting to come. I went to 2 of his baseball games a season even after he stopped inviting me, standing behind the fence at fields 3 hours from my house, not always announcing myself, just needing to see him play. Somewhere in there the story changed. I don't know the exact date it happened, only that by the time Caleb was 22 and engaged to Renee, the version of me he carried in his head bore only a passing resemblance to the man I actually was. In his version, I had abandoned them. In his version, the missed birthday when I had pneumonia and was hospitalized became proof I never showed up. In his version, my anger during the divorce, real, ugly, but never once directed at him, became evidence that I was dangerous. I didn't know all of this yet, sitting at my kitchen table that night. I only knew I needed proof of who I actually was, laid out in a form that couldn't be argued with the way memory can be argued with. Memory is soft. Memory bends toward whoever is telling the story most often and most confidently. I needed something harder than memory. So over the following 6 weeks, I built a file. I requested my banking records going back a decade, highlighting every child support payment, every extra deposit I'd made for school trips and dental bills Marisol had never technically asked for, but that I'd sent anyway. I pulled old emails, hundreds of them, where I'd tried, year after year, to arrange visits that got quietly declined or rescheduled into non-existence. I found the hospital discharge paperwork from the pneumonia, dated the same week as the birthday I'd supposedly ignored. I found photographs, actual printed photographs, of me at those baseball games, standing behind that fence, because my sister had come with me twice and taken pictures on her phone without me even asking her to, the way you photograph things instinctively when you sense they might not last. None of this was revenge yet, this was just evidence. The revenge came later. And it came from a place I didn't expect. It came from Marisol. I hadn't spoken to my ex-wife in 3 years, not since Caleb's college graduation, where we'd managed a stiff, wordless nod across a crowded auditorium. But 2 months after Father's Day, she called me. I heard what happened, she said. No hello, that was always Marisol. She skipped the parts of conversation she considered inefficient. Did you? I said. Caleb told Renee's mother, and Renee's mother told my sister, and my sister told me. Small world, apparently. A pause. I could hear her exhale, the particular exhale of someone about to say something they'd rehearsed. Daniel, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. I let her finish. What she told me took 11 minutes, and it rearranged everything. After the divorce, when Caleb was a teenager and furious at both of us in the diffuse, directionless way teenagers are furious, Marisol had, in her words, made it easier to be the parent he was with by occasionally letting his frustration at me go uncorrected. Not lying exactly, she was very careful to specify that, but not correcting the record either. When Caleb said I never came to things, she didn't remind him of the games I had attended. When Caleb said I never called, she didn't mention the calls he'd declined to answer. Small omissions, repeated over years, calcify into a completely different history. But there was more, and this was the part that made my hands go cold around the phone. Renee's father, Caleb's father-in-law, a man named Walter Hobbs, had been, by Marisol's account, actively feeding Caleb a narrative for the past 2 years. Walter had never met me. Walter had decided, based entirely on the second-hand, decade-stale version of events Caleb brought into that family, that I was unstable, possibly dangerous, and best kept away from his daughter and grandchildren. Walter, it turned out, had a brother who'd walked out on his own family decades earlier, and Marisol suspected, she was careful to say suspected, that Walter had simply mapped that old wound onto me, and Caleb, grieving and uncertain and wanting to belong fully to his new family, had let him. He told Caleb you'd probably shown up drunk or on something, Marisol said quietly. That's why he told him to call the police the second you got out of the truck. Walter's the one who said don't wait, don't talk to him, just call. Caleb told my sister that afterward. He said he felt sick about it within an hour, but he didn't know how to take it back. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. Here is what I want you to understand about the revenge I finally chose, because I suspect it isn't the one you're expecting. I did not confront Walter Hobbs. I did not drive back to that town and stand on that porch again. I did not hire a lawyer to sue anyone for defamation, though I probably could have. Revenge, I had decided somewhere on that 6-hour drive home in June, was not going to be a louder, angrier version of the thing that had already failed. It was going to be precision. It was going to be proof. I wrote Caleb a letter. Not an email, a letter on paper, because paper is harder to delete in a moment of discomfort and easier to return to later, when the discomfort has passed and curiosity remains. I didn't accuse him of anything. I didn't mention Walter by name, because I wanted Caleb to arrive at that realization himself, rather than have it handed to him by an angry parent, which would only let him file it away as one more instance of me being difficult. Instead, I enclosed the file. Bank statements with the payments highlighted, the emails printed and dated, showing every attempt and every decline going back to when he was 14. The hospital paperwork from the missed birthday pneumonia diagnosis circled in red. The photographs from the baseball games, the ones my sister had taken without me asking, me standing behind a chain-link fence in 3 different stadiums across 3 different years, watching a boy who didn't know I was there. And at the very end, a single page handwritten that said only this. I'm not sending this so you'll feel guilty. Guilt doesn't fix anything and I don't want it. I'm sending this because somewhere along the way you were given a version of me that isn't true, and I think you deserve to see the actual record before you decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want to have with your actual father, not the one you've been told about. I love you. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm also not going to keep showing up somewhere I'm not wanted. The door's open. It always has been, whenever you're ready, Dad. I mailed it on a Tuesday, and then I did the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, which was nothing at all. I didn't call. I didn't check my phone every hour. I went back to work. I went fishing with the reel that had never made it into Caleb's hands. I let the silence exist without trying to fill it with more explaining. 3 weeks passed. On a Thursday evening in early September, my phone rang, and it was a number I hadn't seen in 14 months, and for a moment I genuinely couldn't make myself answer it, my thumb hovering over the screen like it belonged to someone else. Dad. I sat down. I don't remember deciding to sit down. My legs just did it for me. I'm here, I said. There was a long silence on the line, long enough that I almost asked if he was still there, and then Caleb said in a voice that sounded younger than 23, younger than I'd heard him in years, I read everything, twice. Renee found me looking at the graduation email, the one where you asked if you could come and I never wrote back, and I lost it, Dad. I lost it in front of her. Okay, I said, because I didn't trust myself to say more than that yet. Walter's been telling me stuff about you for 2 years. I didn't even realize how much I'd absorbed it until I saw the pictures. You were there. You were at 3 of my games and I didn't even know, and I've been telling people for years that you never came to anything. I know, I said. I wasn't trying to make you feel bad about that. I know you weren't. That's what makes it worse. He laughed, a small broken sound. God, that's what makes it so much worse. We talked for 2 hours that night. Not everything got resolved. You don't undo 14 months, or really 14 years in a single phone call, and I wasn't foolish enough to expect that. But he told me near the end that he'd shown the file to Renee, and that Renee, to her credit, had looked at her own father afterward and asked him, point blank, why he told Caleb to call the police on a man he had never once met. Walter's answer, apparently, had not gone over well. I saw Caleb again 2 months later, not on a holiday, not with any occasion attached to it at all, which felt important. He drove the 6 hours to me this time. He came alone. We didn't hug for long at first. It was stiff, unfamiliar, 2 people relearning a physical language they'd once known fluently and had let go rusty through disuse. But he stayed for the weekend. We went fishing. I gave him the reel, finally, 14 months late, still in its box, and he held it like it weighed more than a fishing reel should. I'm sorry, he said, standing on the bank of the river where I used to take him as a boy, for the police thing. I think about it more than I've told anyone. I think about how you must have felt, standing there. I know, I said, I was there. He laughed, and it was a real laugh this time, and something in my chest that had been clenched since June finally, quietly, let go. I didn't get my son back by punishing anyone. I didn't get him back by proving Walter Hobbs was a bitter, misguided old man, projecting his own family's wound onto a stranger, though he was. I got him back the only way that was ever actually available to me, not through anger, not through the confrontation I'd fantasized about on that 6-hour drive home, but through patient, undeniable proof offered once without a leash attached to it, and then the willingness to wait and see what my son would do with the truth once he finally had it. That was my revenge, if you want to call it that. Not humiliation, not punishment, just the truth delivered without demand to a son who deserved the chance to choose his father for who I actually was, rather than for who someone else had decided I must be. The fishing reel sits in his tackle box now, 6 hours away, in a life I'm slowly, carefully being let back into. It's not the relationship we would have had if none of this ever happened. It's better than the alternative, which was no relationship at all, and some Father's Days from now, I imagine we'll go fishing on that day instead of standing on opposite sides of a porch waiting for a patrol car. I'll take that. After everything, I'll take that gladly.